Welcome back to RetroWheelsVault, where horsepower never dies. We're back in the driver's seat with a fresh take on a familiar beast, the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS. If you've seen this one before, don't adjust your carburetors just yet. We're redoing this video because of a little thing called copyright. Apparently the original had a few too many revs in the wrong direction. But no worries, we're firing this one up again, cleaner, meaner, and ready to roast some rubber all over your screen. Now, let's talk Dart GTS. On paper, it was a compact. In reality, it was a street fighting sleeper in a three-piece suit. Dodge took a lightweight A-body and stuffed it with muscle, giving us a car that hit the streets like a middleweight with a heavyweight punch. It didn't need flashy wings or billboard decals, just a snarling V8, a firm stance, and a badge that whispered, "Don't test me." So buckle up, folks. Another classic is unlocked, another beast revived. We're diving into the specs, the soul, and the swagger of this underdog muscle car. Because let's face it, modern cars forgot what muscle means. Hit that like, drop a comment, and get ready to rumble. Let's go. Let's talk about the wildest outlier in the Dart family, the 1968 Hemi Dart Superstock. Now, before you get excited and start thinking your neighbor's GTS is secretly hiding at 426 under the hood, slow your roll, Mopar detective. The Hemi Dart was a completely different beast, built not for the streets but for one purpose, to absolutely destroy the drag strip. Dodge only made 80 of these savage machines, and they were basically the automotive equivalent of a street fighter hopped up on adrenaline and protein powder. The GTS was the cool varsity athlete, quick, sharp, and respectable, but the Hemi Dart? That was the unhinged cousin that only showed up to family reunions to fight your uncle and peel out of the parking lot in a cloud of burnt rubber and glory. These superstock models weren't even finished at the factory. Dodge shipped them partially assembled cars to Hearst, where they got fiberglass fenders, acid-dipped doors, and the legendary 426 Hemi wedged under the hood with a crowbar and a prayer. No badges, no AC, no radio. Just a ticking time bomb of torque. So, while the GTS was impressive, the Hemi Dart was something else entirely. A fire-breathing outlaw with zero chill. The design and construction in the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS is a masterclass in deceptive simplicity, like dressing a prize fighter in a church suit. On the outside, it had the crisp, boxy lines of a compact commuter, but underneath, this thing was a street brawler with a crowbar hidden under its jacket. Dodge took the lightweight A-body platform and gave it just enough muscle tone to make a statement. The GTS trim added a performance hood with twin scoops, bold side stripes, and badging that whispered, "Try me." It wasn't flashy like a Charger or as swoopy as a Mustang. It was more like the guy in the corner of the bar who doesn't talk much until someone pokes it with a stick. Construction was classic Detroit steel. No fancy composites or lightweight gimmicks here. The fenders could take a shopping cart hit and not even flinch. The wheel wells were flared just enough to hint at mischief, and the stance? Aggressive yet polite, like it was waiting for a green light to ruin someone's day. The Dart GTS was built to go fast, take a hit, and keep coming. Think of it as the muscle car equivalent to a linebacker in loafers. Refined on the surface, but all business underneath. Under the hood of the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS lived a beating heart that didn't just thump, it thundered. Standard was the 340 cubic inch LA V8 engine, a high-winding small block with more bark and bite than its conservative horsepower rated of 275 suggested. This wasn't just an engine. It was a caffeinated jackrabbit with a steel spine, eager to rev and ready to rumble. Lightweight and quick off the line, the 340 made the Dart GTS a menace on Main Street and a rocket at the red light. But if you wanted more grunt than rev, Dodge had your back with the optional 383 cubic inch, 6.3 liter big block V8. This was less of a sprinter and more of a sledgehammer. A torque-heavy brute that turned tires into smoke and your spine into a conversation piece. And for the chosen few, only 80 lucky darts in 1968, there was the ultimate unicorn, the 426 Hemi. This wasn't an option you checked at the dealership. These were factory dragstrip assassins, purpose-built to demolish quarter miles. It was like strapping a rocket engine to a go-kart and praying for traction. No matter the flavor, the Dart GTS never skipped leg day. When it came to the drivetrain and transmission, the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS gave you options, because not all muscle car fanatics shift the same way. Dodge knew some folks like to dance with 3 pedals, while others prefer to slap into the drive and let the engine do the talking. Either way, this car was ready to rumble. For the hands-on crowd, there was the 4-speed manual, a floor-mounted fire starter with a Hurst shifter that felt like grabbing a live wire every time you rode through the gears. It gave you full control over the madness, letting you wind that V8 like a yo-yo on a caffeine binge. Prefer something smoother? Dodge had you covered with the 3-speed Torque Flight automatic, one of the most reliable slush boxes ever built. Paired with either the 340 or the 383, the Torque Flight didn't just shift, it snapped. It was like having a streetwise valet who knew how to throw a punch. Power got to the pavement through a robust rear-wheel drive setup, and when you dropped the hammer, the rear end didn't just dig in, it launched. The Dart's drivetrain was a no-nonsense, rubber-burning hotline to performance, ready to answer every time you called. The 1968 Dodge Dart GTS might have been a compact, but its chassis and suspension setup was anything but timid. Riding on Chrysler's tried and true A-body platform, the Dart was light, stiff, and ready to throw elbows in a corner, or blow past the competition in a straight line. It was a muscle car equivalent of a middleweight boxer, agile, fast, and surprisingly durable. Up front, the Dart used torsion bar suspension, which gave it a firm, responsive ride, like teaching a bulldog ballet. It handled corners with a sense of balance you wouldn't expect from a car with that much torque lurking under the hood. The rear end was classic Detroit muscle, leaf springs and a solid axle, simple and strong, like swinging a sledgehammer made of steel and attitude. The GTS models received heavy-duty shocks and beefier sway bars, making sure the car didn't handle like a canoe in a hurricane. It kept the body roll in check and made spirited driving feel planted, not panicked. It wasn't a road course specialist, but for the streets, the drag strip, or the occasional back road brawl, the Dart suspension was dialed in just right. Tough enough to handle the power and just loose enough to let the fun shine through. Step inside the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS and you're greeted by an interior that says, let's get down to business. No digital screens, no ambient mood lighting, just gauges, knobs, and a steering wheel that feels like it came out of a fighter jet. The Dart's cabin was all about driving, not daydreaming. The bucket seats in the GTS were firm, supportive, and ready to hug you through every hard launch or tight corner, like a gym coach who believed in tough love. You could also option a center console with a floor shifter, which gave the interior a more sportier vibe and made you feel like you were piloting something serious. Because you were. As for tech, well, in 1968, technology meant an AM radio, maybe an 8-track player if you were living large. Air conditioning? Optional. Power windows? Rare. But what it lacked in creature comforts, it made up for in character. The dash was clean and legible, with big gauges that told you everything you needed to know and nothing you didn't. Think of it as the cockpit of a street fighting machine. No fluff, no distractions. Just you, the engine, and the road ahead. And really, what else do you need when you've got 300 ponies under the hood? When it came to get all of that V8 fury to the pavement, the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS didn't mess around. At the business end of the drivetrain sat the rear differential, and if you ticked the right box, you got the legendary poly-traction limited sub-rear end. That wasn't just marketing. It meant both wheels dug in when you dropped the hammer, turning smoky one-tire fires into full-blown asphalt warfare. Without it, you might as well have handed your horsepower to just one rear wheel and hope for the best. Most GTS models came with an 8.75-inch rear axle, a solid and beefy setup that could handle whatever abuse your lead foot dished out. Whether you had the snappy 340 or the heavyweight 383, the axle and diff combo was ready to party, and it didn't mind dancing sideways now and then. Braking was handled by front disc brakes, optional but recommended, and rear drums, which got the job done as long as you weren't trying to stop on a dime, or downhill. This wasn't a car built for polite road manners. It was built to launch hard, grip harder, and leave a lasting impression, usually in the form of rubber stripes and second thoughts from whoever lined up next to you. The 1968 Dodge Dart GTS may have been considered a compact in its day, but by today's standards it's got more presence than half the crossover crowd at a suburban grocery store. Measuring 196.2 inches long, 71.6 inches wide, and standing 54 inches tall, the Dart had the low-slung, lean look of a sprinter crouched in the blocks, built for action, not bulk. With a 111-inch wheelbase, it struck a sweet balance between stability and agility, making it feel nimble without being twitchy. And tipping the scales at around 3,000 pounds, it was downright featherweight compared to the land yachts of the era. That meant the GTS didn't have to work as hard to go fast. Think of it as a heavyweight punch packed into a welterweight frame. Its dimensions gave it just enough room inside to keep your knees off the dash, but not so much that you'd mistake it for a family cruiser. The Dart GTS was all muscle in a tailored suit, compact, tight, and ready to pounce. In short, it was the kind of car that could squeeze into a parking spot, rip out from a starting line in under 6 seconds, and still look like it just dared the next guy to try and keep up. The 1968 Dodge Dart GTS had plenty of strengths, and subtlety wasn't one of them. This car was a sleeper with a sledgehammer, lightweight, compact, and stuffed with V8 firepower. Its big performance in a small package formula made it a favorite among street racers and gearheads who liked to embarrass bigger, flashier cars at the stoplights. The 340 engine was a high-revving champ, the 383 brought brute torque, and the posi-traction rear end kept it all from turning into one-wheel appeal drama. It was also easy to work on, built tough, and surprisingly nimble thanks to the torsion bar. In short, it was a brawler in a tailored suit. But no muscle car is perfect, and the Dart had a few weaknesses, like a superhero with a soft spot. Stuffing a 383 into the A-body meant tight engine bay clearance, making wrenching a real knucklebuster. The rear drum brakes could get overwhelmed under heavy use, especially without the optional front discs. Interior comforts, Spartan at best, and the ride could get jittery on rough pavement. Still, the Dart GTS never claimed to be a luxury cruiser. It was built to go fast, look clean, and punch well above its weight, flaws and all. And that wraps up our freshly tuned, copyright clean look at the 1968 Dodge Dart GTS, a compact car with a heavyweight right hook and no patience for pretense. This wasn't a ride that needed chrome overload or luxury gimmicks to make a point. It let the roar of a high-revving 340 or the grunt of a 383 do the talking, and boy, did it speak fluent burnout. We're glad we could bring this one back to life, minus the copyright gremlins. Sometimes you gotta downshift, rework the timing, and fire it up again, and that's exactly what we did here. Thanks for sticking with us through the rerun, rebuilt from the ground up like any good resto mod. Now we want to hear from you. Was the Dart GTS Mopar's most underrated muscle car, or was it just a stepping stone to something bigger? Drop your thoughts, stories, or even your "I almost bought one" regrets in the comments. We're all ears and engine oil. And if this revved your nostalgia engine, go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a ride through classic muscle car history. Remember, keep it loud, keep it classic.